To me, progress is when you see things grow and change in a direction that benefits everyone involved.
I think that progress to the city and progress to us are two really different things.
The idea of progress is probably too often thought of as like financial progress.
True progress means equity.
Well, progress is supposed to be like forward momentum, right? So what are we moving towards?
I always look at the arts, like, are there any movements?
I think that expanding your view of what art is and making it so that different kinds of art can thrive here, not just the ones that you think are marketable, is progress.
I got a studio on Capitol Hill in 1989, about 30 years ago. And I've been in the same studio ever since, which is a miracle in Seattle.
I have been living and working on and off the Hill for 27 years.
So when I first moved here, what I really loved about Capitol Hill was a queer neighborhood, an artist neighborhood, and I loved the different sort of coffee shops and little shops along Broadway and queer-owned businesses and, you know, art stores and like their newsstand on Broadway, and they were just, it kind of felt like this cool little almost bohemian city.
Capitol Hill was once a place where artists and musicians would come, share their stuff, show their work. There's a lot of music venues, tons of old, really cool, weird buildings, and the rent was affordable. It was really sort of dynamic environment. Lots of different communities felt welcome in that space.
The founders of Velocity Dance Center wanted to open a community space for dancers in Seattle, just so they could rehearse and do work and find community. And Capitol Hill at the time was relatively affordable and also had a big artistic community already in place.
Capitol Hill has always been kind of the place to be in Seattle. There was always a lot of great venues here, a lot of cool artists, a lot of poets, a lot of punks. It was a safe place for freaks, a safe place for people that were different.
We used to have this like haven where if you were in any way feeling like the city was pushing you out, you could come to Capitol Hill and find 18 people who would just immediately like you. And it felt like a fucking Cheers episode. Oh, sorry, can I curse? It felt like what Cheers was supposed to be, like where you could just walk up to the hill and you would see like rainbows in the street and be like, oh, I can feel safe here.
In the first few years that, you know, nobody would come up here really, and people would kind of harass you about, why do you have an art studio on Capitol Hill? There's nothing going on up here. It became quickly all artists and all small businesses, and you knew everybody in the neighborhood. There was a sense of community, which was nice. It made you feel part of something.
I think what always brought me back to the Hill was that sense of community. You know, artistic community, gay community, whatever, there was just communities.
There was no money here. There wasn't this influx of people here. And that was the coffee and the cigarette and like the poetry. That was the moment, is like, that was Capitol Hill. It was a feeling.
I started going into Petit Rosso when I was answering phones at Aria, which was a hair salon that was right next door. It was my social group. Everything surrounded Petit Rosso at the time. So when we got the opportunity to take it over, we wanted to keep that. We didn't want to see Petit Rosso die.
It was really fun. That was, in the 90s when we'd be getting calls from Rolling Stone magazine asking us if Pearl Jam was drinking coffee there. And we were kind of like, oh my God, Rolling Stone's calling, hang up.
Places like the old bus stop, Man Rake and Cora, a lot of the nightlife spots that I used to work at and perform at, and we would do things like literary readings there, and like an arts and crafts night where you come and have cocktails and do crafting, just fun stuff like that. But that was artistically based and sort of really helped to foster that community that we were talking about.
Punctuation Gallery was also happening, and there's probably a ton of other venues at the time that were really inspiring and inclusive. And those venues started to shut down, actually. And I thought to myself, it might be important to, as an experiment, to get a venue and then to give everyone access to the venue. So the idea of Love City Love was being inspired by these other venues that were all-inclusive, multicultural, hyper-creative, and that seemed to be fading out of Seattle and out of Capitol Hill at that time. The very nature of gentrification and how it works just was crushing all of that culture.
You'd run into people on the street and, sort of like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood or Sesame Street or something, where you just see people everywhere. Now it's just a sea of strangers.
I can walk around in my neighborhood for 2 weeks sometimes and not see anybody I know, which never used to happen.
Capitol Hill's long been a center for cutting-edge arts, LGBT culture, small businesses, in these great auto row buildings. What's changed is it's also become one of the most desirable places on the West Coast to live.
The most obvious thing that's happened is that the amazing cultural hubs that are these really rad spaces and buildings have been demolished, and then these crazy concrete and glass buildings go up.
Private developer bought Oddfellows Hall, and at the time, many arts nonprofits were actually housed at Oddfellows and could not afford the huge rent increase. And so it prompted almost all of the nonprofits to leave Oddfellows Hall to find their other spaces.
I've watched the whole landscape change, it's changed architecturally, but also the energy has changed and it's become a lot more mainstream.
There used to be a giant thrift store right across the street from us, which is now being turned into like an office workspace. And that's where we would get our costumes. We called it our costume shop. And we would just go in there and we knew everybody who worked there. And that was kind of the last straw for us. When that giant, always busy thrift store, when they were told to leave, that was like the first red flag of like, something is happening to Capitol Hill.
And I think that's the problem with Capitol Hill is they just decided not to have any balance. It was just a free-for-all. And I think the problem with capitalism is that people lose sight. They don't understand that a lot of artists, may only live on like $800 a month.
I think we're seeing a lot more of the corporate businesses because it's just too difficult for an independent person to have an idea and execute it. It's impossible without massive funding. Just the rent by itself is, on average on Capitol Hill, $10,000 to $15,000 a month just for the rent. So how does an independent person navigate that? They don't.
So how do you continue to bring arts and culture to a space that costs $10,000 a month to rent and is all new construction and it's kind of cold concrete walls with glass? That's just not viable.
What is the language, like the poetry? How do you articulate what happened? Like all of the feelings that are almost ineffable, like you don't even know how to like explain the feelings. And I guess that's what good art does, is it explains things you can't put into words maybe.
When we're moving through something or when we're evolving, there's usually an art movement happening as well. And there are no movements. The art movements have become art markets now, which is obscene.
It's the same stuff that happened to hip hop. It's the same thing that happened to punk. It's like these things were birthed out of like really immense struggles of people that felt really, really deep feelings.
Because that's where we question things, right? Through the arts, we question. You're not supposed to accept what is. You're supposed to creatively start to seek what you want.
There was a show that I did where we worked with this organization to procure a house on Capitol Hill that was going to be demolished. This show was about progress, and it was about a brother and sister who are living together in their childhood home, and the sister's mentally ill, and the brother's trying to sell the house, and their mother has died, And the very week we were supposed to be open, we got locked out by the developers. So it was kind of this very sort of meta, like life imitating art, imitating life, imitating weird thing.
Well, we're looking at these high-density buildings coming up all throughout town. Their ground floors are made for retail that are sitting empty because no one can actually afford the retail. And the developers would rather them just sit empty than work with an arts organization to fill that space. And that disconnect, I think, is one of the fundamental problems.
And that's how colonization works, or how classism works. Like, you know when you're not wanted. It's clear. Like, it's a $6 latte. Get out. You're not wanted here anymore. Or we have to be moved out of 1400 East Pike Street because they want to court Howard Schultz as a client. They want that to be a Starbucks Reserve on 14th and Pike, not a Love City Love, not an all-inclusive, creative, multicultural venue valuing health and wellness.
The way Annex is trying to grow is we're trying to make an ADA accessible space. So we either need to put wheelchair elevator in these stairs or we need to find a new space. But every time we try to like find a secondary space that we can go to do ADA accessible shows, we tell them that we're like a theater company, and they literally are like, well, we don't want a theater company here because we don't think that that's lucrative.
I mean, I pleaded. I tried so hard with 14 and Pike. I mean, they seem like somewhat open, progressive people, and I like would write him these emails of like the future of culture and that, like, trying to illustrate how much power he has over letting us be in the building, and like, would he want to collaborate? Like, what if we're not just a tenant anymore? What if you could see like who we are as like people?
I'm in like ground zero. You know, the 6 months after Petty Rosso opened was when all the construction on 11th, and we were so sensitive at that time. We had no sidewalk for 3 months. We had a massive building getting built across, and then the next one started, and then the next one started. It was like 3 years of construction for us, and there was zero help from the city.
You know, you look back and you start walking around this neighborhood and thinking like what you could have done, and it just feels so big and lonely. And like it all happened without you.
You know, I used to joke that I was nobody in this neighborhood, and then for a little while I felt like I was somebody, and now when I walk around I feel like I'm nobody again.
Individual artists in particular are getting pushed out every day. LGBT seniors are getting pushed out every day, and we could even lose the beloved arts organizations that we can easily take for granted on Capitol Hill.
I don't know how to preserve or retain or sustain the soul or the culture of this neighborhood, because it's so powerful the way money works. Like, it's just so powerful and it's so crippling.
I do think that investment, like really big scale investment on the part of the government, could really help, because I think we need to work in that scale. It can't just be building by building. It's got to be kind of, I'm thinking of it as a whole district, because what I'm seeing right now is that individual artists and arts organizations are kind of doing it, but we, even taken all together, we just don't have that kind of power. So I think if we were able to get that big lift from our state and local agencies, like an even bigger lift than what they're giving us right now, it would really, really be helpful.
What are the kind of interventions we can create, maybe on a city level, to kind of ensure that there's more, or more transparent community dialogue around the structures that go up around us?
The old narrative is, if you want progress, well, then we need to dismantle this, and people need to suffer. That's all life is, right? Somebody is telling a story, and the moment the majority of us believe that story, that becomes our reality. And everybody's always worried about who has the power and who has the wealth. I'm like, who's controlling the narrative?
I feel like the ability to use our voices to tell our story is being lost.
The only way to keep a community going is to be able to have those people be around to support that, you know, and to have places where they can gather and places where they can create their work and find like-minded people.
Can we activate those spaces and figure out a way to work with developers and say, hey, how can we work together to activate these empty spaces? Because they sit empty for months, sometimes years, after they build up these big condos. And we really want to think about, can we figure out some, I don't know, tax loophole or incentive from the city or something where there are spaces that are dedicated to art, music, health and wellness.
So I'm very much about artists as activists and artists building momentum together, because we're, generally speaking, so poor and powerless that it does require coordination to move policy change towards our benefit.
You know, what I would like is everybody to be able to come back and support the artists that still remain here. And, you know, my hope is the remaining artists and organizations that are still fortunate enough to have their spot up here can just keep working as long as we can.
And it's not longing for some nostalgic time that once was. It's just that, like, we are really creative, human beings are really creative. And so why are we settling for this? Why can't we curate the Pike Pine corridor with a lot more soul?
We need more affordable retail. We need more affordable commercial space. We need more artist ownership. We need more artist control. We need a lot more resources. We need particularly government to step up with more dollars to support all this. And there's a way that Capitol Hill can remain the neighborhood that is both desirable and affordable for the rest of our lives.